So let's jump in. We're going to, for this week, we're going to do a few more teachings on The Mystery of Life by Sri Sharda Devi. This is just a collection of her writings, or her thoughts and statements, divided into each by topic. And it's really quite nice because you can go quite deep into her teachings. And the thing about Holy Mother's teachings is they're always presented so simply and so straightforward, and it's when you sit and contemplate them that they really reach in and make an impact, because the things that she says are usually very straightforward teachings, but in order to fulfill those teachings requires everything. All of Vedanta is included in that. And actually, I think that's true of almost all teachings in the Vedanta. If you can read 2 pages of any of our order's literature, you have enough to work the rest of your life on, because mastering any one teaching will at some point bring in all of the other teachings. It's what Vivekananda. I think it's part of what he realized when he said the macrocosm and the microcosm are one, are the same. And it's exactly that. You can't take any particular spiritual teaching and isolate it from the rest. In order to understand it and fulfill it, it will eventually touch all of the other teachings together. And so it's an interesting practice to just take one thing that you want to master and master it. Just that one thing if you want to. Mother will lead you into the whole gamut of spiritual life just by trying to master any one of her teachings. It's why sometimes Thakur talks about some of those sadhus that had a singular practice, the one that stood at the waterfall all day long every day and tried to see the waterfall for the first time each time and appreciate its beauty. And he would just sit there praising the waterfall, praising God's beauty through the waterfall all day long. And that was his one and only practice. And when you think about that, all of the implications of seeing that waterfall for the first time every time requires absolute presence in the moment, a letting go of the past, a knowing that you're not the body and the mind because you're not using it to collect information about yourself, and to see it freshly each time and allow yourself to be affected by it each time takes an absolute mastery of non-attachment, to not hold any aspect of that experience of looking at the waterfall in your mind so that it colors your new experience as you look at it again. And so it's like that, these very simple practices. The other one was the sadhu that walked around with a chandelier crystal all the time, because it constantly reminded him, he said, that the world is illusory because there's just light. There's no colors. But when you take light and shine it through the prism, it becomes a multitude of colors. And he would use that about, God's love, that Satchitananda, when it shines through the prism of the mind, it becomes our karma, our story, our life. And but really the truth of it is it's simply the love of God shining through the mind and manifesting. So, these individual teachings, you can just take any one of them and sit with them, and they will teach you all the others, because all of the other truths are necessary to hold up any particular truth. And that speaks to why in this universe we are not separate and apart. It was interesting to me. I learned how to read the tarot cards back in 19, I don't know, 94 or something. I took a trip. I just started wandering. I woke up one night in the middle of the night and was just very unhappy. And I was sitting in my bed in the middle of the night, very unhappy, looking around at everything and wondering what was wrong, because I was very frustrated because I felt like I had done everything I was supposed to do. I went to school, I graduated from college, had a good job, I paid my bills, paid off my loans. I had a house and a car and everything was in place. I had friends. I was very entertained in my life, but somehow I was just horribly unhappy. And I remember that one night I sat there in my bed and looked around my room and realized that all of my accomplishments could be summed up in the fact that everything I owned was bigger than it was when I was in college. That's the only way I could sum up my accomplishment. My TV had gone from 13 inches to 37 inches, and my car had gone from a scooter to a car, and my apartment had gone from a room off of a garage to now a house. And all these things, had just simply gotten bigger. And I sat there and thought, God, if I just keep going on my same path, nothing's going to change in my life except the size of the things that I own. All I can do at this point is get either bigger or multiples of everything that I have, because I had everything I needed and more. And so I said to myself in a very California way, as I sat there in bed, I said, Vance, which was my name at the time, I said, Vance, I give you permission to do whatever you think you need to do to find the meaning in your life. And the next day I just started looking around, and I had been reading Smithsonian Magazine, and they had talked about the hot new spot in the world for expatriates was Prague in the Czech Republic. So I got on, well, at those days you didn't get online. I called the travel agent and booked myself a ticket to Prague. I sold everything, literally had a giant garage sale and sold everything that I had, all the way down to a suitcase, and just traveled the world. I ended up living in Prague for like 6 months until winter came. Nobody wants to be in Prague in the winter. It's horrible. So I'll just save you a trip. So I met a friend in London, and we decided to go to New Zealand. And I learned little pieces on that trip. That was kind of the start, really. That ended up with me moving into a monastery 5 years later, 6 years later. But these little things, these little practices that we do, we learn. Oh, I started that whole thing talking about the tarot cards, which was my point, and then I just ran off with it. But the tarot cards and reading runes and reading tea leaves, all of those practices work on the idea that everything in the universe is dependent upon everything else in the universe. And that when you draw this tarot card, it's not an independent action. The farthest atom in the universe is affecting that choice. Everything in the universe is as it is, including that card, because of everything else in the universe. And so it's very much like what Sri Nisargadatta says. He says that this moment contains the entirety of the past, and this moment projects the entirety of the future. And so if you can know this moment, absolutely, you will know the entire past and the entire future. And so that's the theory behind all of these little, I don't know what you call those, uh, I guess, I don't know what are those occult powers, maybe. I don't know.
Divination?
Yeah, well, like tarot cards, runes, all of those, just different things that people use to discern the future or to tell the past or to fix a problem. I learned from a gypsy woman. I rented a room from her in Prague for a couple of months, and she would get up every morning, and her family, she had a daughter and a husband, and they would sit at the kitchen table, and I was invited to breakfast with them, and she would sit there and read all of their tarot cards for the day to give them instructions on what to be careful about and what was going to happen for them. And so they would her daughter Ava would go to school, and her husband would go off to work, and it would just be she and I left at the table. And so she asked me one day if I wanted to learn. And I was like, yeah, that would be interesting. So so I learned how to do it, and that was that. I haven't touched them since, actually. I don't even know where they are. I don't have them anymore, actually. But that's where we're going, even tonight, because we're going to be discussing karma. If you remember last week, we we went over that horrible story where Sita makes everybody suffer because her roof was leaking and she needed a repairman to fix it. And the idea behind that was this whole idea of suffering and karma, and how it's necessary for life to go on, for the play to continue. You can't have a play with no problems. You always need a central theme or a problem or something in the story, the plot line that needs to be solved. And so Mother has created a self refilling uh, plot line for us named Karma. But she gives us this one assurance here at the end of the story about the leaky roof. She says, "No one can suffer for all the time," which is a nice thing to remember because when we are in one of those states of suffering, it does seem like that's all we have. I can remember some of my depressive episodes just really convincing me that life would never be meaningful, would never be bright, would never be positive. And it really felt like that when you were in the bowl of that feeling. And that's the nature of the mind. We have these patterns of thought that create these walls around our considerations, and we can't see over them as long as we identify with them. We can't see over them, and it convinces us that perhaps we are going to suffer forever. But Mother says, no one can suffer for all time. No one will spend all his days on this earth in suffering. Every action brings its own result, and one gets one's opportunities accordingly, which is a very interesting thing. Now, she says that everything has its cause and effect. Everything that you do, every active action that you take, has its effect, and some of them good and some of them bad and some of them a mixture of both. But what causes our action? What causes you to move? If you have a marble on the top of a hill, what causes it to move? It's destabilized somehow, right? So it's an attachment. It's attachment that causes us to act. We like something, we don't have it, we want to go get it. Something is happening we don't like, we are provoked to an action to change what we don't like. And see, Sri Nisargadatta says that's our only problem is attachment to thoughts in the mind, because they lead us to a constant round of action. And some of those actions are good, will lead to light or balance, so that we eventually realize our contented nature. And some of those actions will take us farther out of balance, will lead us into more discontentment and give us more problems that need to be fixed. And if we're not observant, if we're not aware, which is why awareness is such a big part of our spiritual practice, then we won't be able to detect what our actions are causing. We won't be watching them. We won't be aware. And so we get in deeper and deeper and deeper into a tangle until we just can't even see up anymore. And it's not unusual in Maya for what is right to seem like absolutely what is wrong. It literally can turn the world upside down for us. So the disciple says to her, then is everything the fruit of karma? And Mother, what else if not karma? So everything is the fruit of karma. Interesting thing. The fact that we see the world of objects is because of attachment. The reason that we feel separate from things is because of our attachments and our aversions. The reason we feel unique is because of our collection of restrictions and limitations that we've used to identify who we are, what we like and what we don't like, what we hope for and what we avoid, what our goals and dreams in life are, and what our horrors are. This is what makes the world go round. And by being continually entertained by our thinking and continually attracted to our memories, we project needs and desires into the future that cause us to keep moving and to keep changing. And we become part of the changing world. We no longer realize that we are observers, that we are separated from that world of change, that we are the container of that world of change, actually, that we're not in it, it is in us. So she goes on to say, each has to get the results of the actions he earned for this life. A pin at least must prick where a wound from a sword was due. Now, that's interesting. She's saying everything has to be paid, but she also says that shows here that what? That karma is not absolute, right? If you deserve to be stabbed with a knife, there are changes that you can make in living. Of course, immediately we get tripped up because we're not the doer. But as long as we believe that we're the doer, we are the doer. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. In actuality and truth, things happen. They're not according to time, space, and causation. They're not according to karmas. They're just going on. They're happening. But because we don't know that, and because we believe ourselves to be separate and apart from the divine and everything else, and because we take our actions as our own, we've attached to thoughts as being our thoughts. With that comes a sense of responsibility. With that comes the belief that we are good people or bad people, angry people, lucky people, unlucky people. We come up with these definitions based on the conditions of mind, and they become unbalancing within us. They are things that cause us to move into action. And so Mother is saying here, though, that it's a continual, it's like a continual retallying of your karma. Everything that you do goes onto the karmic load, and everything else kind of adjusts. So if you are, if you've done that thing that makes you deserve getting stabbed, which whatever it might be, who knows, but then you realize that you've done such a horrible thing and you go and apologize and you're nice to the person and boom, 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 then your karma changes. Even though you might have done something that you deserve to stab for, because you recognized it, because you've made changes accordingly, you can mitigate that damage. So you're not stuck to suffer forever. And your suffering can be reduced and your positives can be increased. But you see, what we want is freedom. And freedom means we don't want good or bad karma. We don't want anything that sticks us to being identified with the body mind. And so we try and keep that needle at zero, and we do that by trying not to identify with anything in the body and mind. We're trying to constantly to remember that we are the ever free, ever pure, blissful self that is the container of all things, that we are not affected by the world of change. The world of change is only a world of thought, and thoughts cannot reach the soul. They cannot affect the soul. And so our effort is to try and to understand that and to see that internally by going to those very subtle places within that give us the hints about what we are and about our relationship with body, mind, and the perceived world. And with this teaching alone right here, she gives you an empowerment. You're not a victim in this world. That's one of the most powerful things for us to remember. You are not a victim of your karma. The reason that karma exists is not to punish you or to explain your punishments. The reason that karma exists, it's just a theory put forward by the sages in order to give you a means of correcting your mistakes, of moving out of your ignorance and moving into the light, into vidya. And so the point of karma is not to tell you why things are so cruddy for you. It's to give you a sense of empowerment that you can change your karma. That's the whole point. Everything that you do has its effect. So you can do things that have an effect that lead you toward realization. And so karma, that's the point of karma. The other point in karma that I like to make when we talk about karma, and we're going to talk about it a lot here because a lot of these scriptures say it, is that you can only talk about your own karma. It is a very, very unhealthy thing to talk about other people's karma because you know nothing. And I could say that 100 times. You know nothing about another person's karma. You have no access to their mind, no access to their history, no knowledge of their relationship with the divine. There is no way for you to know. Now, why do I say that? Because one of the biggest dangers of karma is that it will break down your compassion, because you'll look around and start thinking these horrible thoughts. People get what they deserve, right? And so you'll walk by some person suffering and you'll think, oh, that's their karma. And you'll walk by and not do anything, which means that you won't be who you are, because you as a divine being, you as a manifestation of divine love and wisdom, you and your true self would never walk by a suffering entity and blame it on their karma and just leave them lying there, right? And that's why it's very important to use karma as a tool for your own spiritual growth and not as a way to explain the lives and carrying ons of the world around you. It only works for yourself, right? And to remember also, and this is Swami Prabhupada, since we're talking about karma, I'm just going to throw all this stuff out there. Swami Prabhupada said a wonderful thing to me one time, and I've mentioned it before, but I remind myself of it quite a bit. He says, and he told me at the time, he said, many Swamis will not agree with what I'm telling you right now. He said, but from my long life of studying, he says, I believe this to be true. He says, karma is not what happens to you. Karma is defined by what you're able to do with what happens to you. And for his example, he said, suppose you have two men who have lost their ability to walk. He said one of them grows angry and bitter and demands his rights and wants to be the first one on the bus and is always craggy about things and always bemoaning his loss. I can't walk. How can you expect me to do that? I can't even get up, having that kind of attitude about things. The other man, or woman, but in the story it's a man, joins the Special Olympics and becomes a gold medalist and inspires thousands of similarly challenged people to rise above their limitations, and becomes a big speaker and becomes a positive influence in the world. And so, Prabhupada asked me, he said, which one had good karma? They both lost their ability to walk. Does that mean they both have bad karma? He says, no. He says, see, the bad karma affected the man who made the choices to focus on his loss, to be limited by his loss, to be angry by his loss, and to be defeated by his loss. That's bad karma. The other man was able to take what happened to him and produce gold out of it. He was able to take what happened, to find a strength in it, to find a beauty in it, to find an empowerment in it, and he went a completely different direction. So you see, your karma, it definitely includes what happens to us, but that's not the point of karma. The point of karma, of good karma, is your ability to take what happens to you and to create gold out of it. That in every moment, God gives you everything necessary to manage your karma in a positive, helpful way. Always. Always. So anytime you're sitting there looking at life and it gets to a point where you just think, my God, it's lost. It's all over for me. Everything's gone wrong. Everybody hates me. I've lost everything. At that time, there's a great movie called, I'm not going to be able to remember it. It's an Italian film. And it's about a prostitute, actually. And she has been saving up from her prostitution her whole life in order so she can retire and get out of being a prostitute. It's something that was thrust on her and she had no real choice in life. And so she's saving up and saving up and saving up. And she meets this wonderful man who is not just a John. He actually seems to love her and seems to really want to marry her, and she's so exuberantly happy that finally she's going to be, because he seems like a wealthy guy and a very responsible guy. She sees a new life for herself. And so she sells her house that she had been saving up for. She pulls all of her savings together and gives it to him because he's asked her to marry him. And so, like that. Then what happens? A terrible thing happens. He takes her out on a picnic and he literally pushes her off a cliff. But she survives and he takes off. After he thinks she's dead, he takes off and he's got all of her money, got everything. She literally has nothing now. And she climbs up. This is the closing of the movie. She climbs up from the fall. She manages to survive. And she's walking down this path, and these children are playing, and everything's going on. And she has nothing now. She has nothing at all. And suddenly you see this twinkle in her eye, and you see her smile, and she begins to dance with the children as she's there. And you begin to realize that she has accepted without bitterness that she has nothing and is enjoying the freedom of having nothing as she dances with these children and the credits roll and the movie is over. And that to me is enlightenment, actually. When we learn to accept the moment in total patience as it is, and to allow our nature to dictate what we express or what we manifest, that is life. That is beauty. That is God knowledge. So each has to get the results of the actions he's earned for his life. A pin at least must prick where a wound from a sword was due. Such is life, here today, gone tomorrow. Nothing goes with one except one's merit and demerit. Good and evil deeds follow one even after death. Right? Now, where are these deeds contained if they follow you through death? Interestingly enough, where do these things go? Right? We've talked in the past that we don't live in a world, right? We live in a mind. And the mind is what contains our karma, right? Shakti, as it were, contains our karma. And so that mind, which is the container of everything in reality, the mind which is the container of everything, carries the karmic debt or balance from life to life for us. Because we're attached to mind. That's what makes mind the moving mind, the changing mind. And through our attachment to our mind as being our own, that is what attaches us to our karma. That is what makes us subject to our karma. That freedom is detachment. And detachment is knowing that your thoughts in the mind are not your thoughts. That when a thought of a desire goes through your mind, it is not your desire. It's simply a thought about a desire, about an object. And so this is what follows us from life to life, our attachment to mind and body. And so as long as that attachment exists, as long as we think our thoughts are our thoughts, our actions are our actions, that attachment is what subjects us to our karma, which is, again, a very freeing thing. It's not a third-party God out there somewhere in the heavens keeping track of what's right and wrong for you so he can do things to you. It's you taking your karma and doing what you want to do with it. So when you're done, you can literally lay it down. Like Mother says, you can have your realization in this moment if you want to, which means if you want it more than you want any identification you have with your mind, if you want it more than any story that you hold precious in your mind, if you want it more than anything you identify with in the projections of your future or in the occurrences of your past, if you can possibly get yourself to know mother enough to want her more than anything in the mind or of your body, then freedom is yours. You can lay down your mind or lay down its activity or your interest in its activity anytime, anytime, and you find your freedom, because that karma is only yours because you think it's yours. And it only follows you and affects you because you think you're responsible for it and you carry it with you. I've told a story. There's another movie. I wish I could remember the names of these movies. But there's a movie, something about the South America and the Catholic Church coming in there, and one of the priests who's been sent there as a missionary goes native and realizes that the Catholic Church is being horribly abusive in order to establish itself as a power in the New World. And so he goes native and starts trying to organize and warn the local tribes that these Spanish conquistadors are coming. And so he tries to get them ready for that and hidden from it. Anyway, part of the story is he meets this young man who he converts to Catholicism, but the young man had led a terrible life and had been part of a lot of the abuse that had gone on. And the young man decides, as a penance, he would take all of the treasures that he had stolen and he would carry them in this giant sack over his back all the time, that he would carry them as a punishment for the rest of his days. And there's this scene where they're climbing up this hill with the conquistadors in tight pursuit behind them. So it's the priest and a couple of other people and this man. And the man is, of course, holding them back because he has this giant bag of gold hanging off of his shoulders that he refuses to let go of as his punishment. And the priest tells him, for God's sake, let it go. And the priest takes a sword and swings it and slices off the rope that's holding the treasures to the man's back. And it falls off, and the man just suddenly jerks forward, in a freedom of it. And he looks at the priest, and you can see this calculation going on in his mind. Can he accept the freedom he's just been given? Well, it turns out he can't. And he literally curses the priest, goes back down the hill, and ties the weight back to his shoulders again, and starts his climb up and ends up getting killed. But this a very, very insightful event for the nature of karma. It's like it's you that thinks you deserve your karma, this or that. And it's you that won't let go of it because you think you deserve this or that, or because you're unworthy of this or that, or because you can't accept that gift. And that's why we talk about, especially in relationship to karma and this freedom, is you have to know grace. You have to know grace. You have to know the nature of unlimited, unconditioned love that is divine love. You have to know, because that is the only way that you will be able to give yourself permission to let go of your karma. It's the only way. So we have to know grace. We have to know Mother. And in that grace, we have to be willing to accept it. And here comes my favorite line that I say about grace. Infinite grace requires infinite humility to accept it. You have to be able to believe and say, you can do nothing. Try as you might. It is by Mother's grace alone that we go forward. And when you know that, when you can say that in the depth of your heart, you're free. And grace is the key to that freedom. Otherwise, we continue to believe that our karma is our own, that our debts must be paid, that our winnings must be shared. And around it goes. One suffers as a result of one's own actions, right? So it's not anybody out there doing things to us, it's our own actions. So instead of blaming others for such sufferings, one should pray to the Lord, and depending entirely on his grace, there it is, depending entirely on his grace, try to bear them patiently and with forbearance under all circumstances. So this is that importance. Eckhart Tolle has a whole chapter on this, of accepting the moment as it is, knowing that it's perfect, right? And there's a few things the scriptures say. I know that in Romans in the Bible, it says, all things work together for good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose. So that notion that everything happening in your life is for your good, that's one of the first things we have to accept, because that's the only way we can see the moment perfect, that this is exactly as it should be. There's no accidents here. Nobody's being mean or unjust. Life is happening, and this is what has occurred. And so we try to bear them patiently with forbearance. What is that forbearance? That courage, that fortitude under all circumstances. So we accept the moment as perfect. We accept things in this moment as they are. We accept Mother's presence in this moment. We accept her love for us. We accept her grace. And we know it's because of that grace that we're good enough. Never for our actions. Those things, it's a continual trap, as it were. So depending entirely on his grace, try to bear them patiently with forbearance under all circumstances. So this is, again, living fully in the moment, being fully present, because Mother, you have to have, God is presence, right? God is the I am. And so this constant repetition of the name is what puts us in touch with the constant flow of grace and the constant presence of an unconditioned and divine love. And we learn about it by being in the presence of the beloved, always. She says, my son, forbearance is a great virtue. Patience, the ability to accept the moment as it is, to be perfect. It is a great virtue to be able to do that, to not complain, to not think, oh, yeah, I wish things were different. Oh, I want a different life. Oh, I want a different house. Oh, I want a different husband or wife. I want. That's not the virtuous way. The virtuous way is to sit and look at the moment, find beauty in it, find the possibility in it, touch your nature, your divine nature, remember in your own mind, I'm free, I'm pure, I'm blissful. I am the child of the Divine Mother. And on that identity which is based on things that don't change, we manifest. And that manifestation will be freedom from our karma, freedom from the hole that we've dug for ourselves. And it will be the manifestation of grace. So, my son, forbearance is a great virtue. There's no other like it. That's quite a statement. Patience, forbearance, acceptance. That's the greatest virtue. To be able to sit in this moment and not complain. To see the perfection of the moment. That is pure, that's enlightenment. That's pure grace. That when you can sit and see everything as it is and know that it's perfect. Greg was telling me about one of these stories of someone with a near-death experience. And he said that person said that one of the things about not being stuck in his mind, not having a body, but something that was part and parcel of being the subtle self in his experience while he was dead, was that he could see pristinely clearly that everything sparkled with perfection. Everything he looked at, every wrong he could see, every right he could see that it was perfect as it was, where it was placed, that everything spoke of love, everything spoke of God, of the divine. So this ability to not get caught up in what is and to constantly be trying to change it, because Sri Nisargadatta actually says the only difference between the saint and the sinner, he said, is that sinners are constantly trying to improve the moment, whereas saints are constantly aware of its perfection. right? So that's the only difference between a sinner and a saint. The sinner is constantly trying to make the moment better. The saint is always seeing its perfection as it is. And that's forbearance. That's how we touch that forbearance. That's how we build our patience, is through knowing that, accepting that, having faith in that. One must be patient like the earth. What iniquities are being perpetrated on her, yet she quietly endures them all. Man, too, should be like that. Right? It's like the bull with the mosquito on it. This mosquito is riding on the horn of the bull. And the mosquito goes down and says to the bull, I've been riding you for a while, and it occurred to me that I might have been causing you some trouble having to carry me around like that. And I wanted to apologize for being for being insensitive. And the bull was like, what? You're no problem to me. Bring your whole family and sit on my horn. It's no problem at all. So it's that idea. It's being bigger than your problems, not being affected by them. You see them all as gnat-sized problems. You accept them. Oh yes, okay, we'll deal with it. We're dealing with that now, and you go forward. In the moment, your problems come one at a time. They're not problems without history and without projection. They're just obstacles. So in the moment, accept the obstacles. Don't let them indicate a story of any kind. Just say, oh, this has come. This is part of the moment. This must be dealt with. And you deal with it as a manifestation, right? Not as a reaction. Reactions come from stories, positive reactions, negative reactions. So it's not a reaction, it's a response from our nature. There is no treasure equal to contentment, and no virtue equal to fortitude. Right? So no treasure equal to contentment. That's exactly what we're talking about. If the moment is perfect, you're content. If you're content, you don't have to build a future. If you're content, you don't have to blame a past. If you're content, you can be. And that's required for presence, for this divine awareness. So no treasure equal to contentment, no virtue equal to fortitude. Fortitude is a courageousness about what is. It's an indomitable spirit. We can do this. We can manage this. That's those affirmations that we make. I'm ever free. I'm ever pure. I'm ever blissful. I am the heir to God and all things divine. I'm not a beggar. I'm a child of the mother. That's something that Swamiji told me. Swami Prabhupada told me many, many years ago in a big struggle I had. And I was weeping. I think I told this story, but I was weeping and so upset, at my own condition. And he yelled at me, not to punish me. He yelled at me to get my attention. He said, "Why are you weeping? You are a child of the mother." That's how we take our problems. I'm a child of the mother. I will not be defeated by this. I will not be overcome by this. I'm not going to be negative about it. I'm not going to complain about it. I'm not going to even wish it was different. I'm simply going to act from my nature in this moment, in the company of the beloved, and accept it as perfect. This is a payment, perhaps, for what I've done, if you're going to stay in the karmic cycle. This is payment for my actions. This is a challenge for my growth. There's a statement in the Old Testament, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And we can look at our life that way. All of our karma is meant to sharpen us, meant to bring us to truth, to knowledge. Right. You see, my son, it is not a fact that you will never face dangers. Difficulties always come, but they do not last forever. You will see that they pass away like water under a bridge. See, this is using the weakness of the changing world in order to build strength in yourself. If something is not going to last forever, that makes it significantly less important. It can be dealt with. It can be overcome. That's the advantage of being present, of living in the moment, is that you don't have to worry about the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about all of your samskaras and all of the past. They have no bearing on you if you're present in the moment, if you're present with the divine in this moment. Everything becomes manageable for you. You know, you don't have to become a good person for the rest of your life. Just be a good person right now. That's all. You don't have to renounce cake for the rest of your life. Just renounce it right now. That's all. Don't think in big terms, because big terms is what whoops us. If you sit there and think, oh God, I have to renounce cake for the rest of my life, oh, it becomes this huge, tragic occurrence. Like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to do that. So why do that? Don't make decisions for the rest of your life. It's not necessary. The rest of your life isn't here. The only thing that's here is this moment. So renounce in this moment and let it be. Don't make a story of it. Don't use your story to explain why you can't do it. Oh, but I love cookies so much. I enjoy those, all those macadamia white chocolate chip cookies. Oh, I love those. I'll never be able to renounce those. What are you doing? You're living in the past. You're dredging up your samskaras, and you're having to deal with all of that now. Instead of just saying, I'm not going to eat that cookie right now. That's all. That's all that's necessary. I'm just not going to eat that cookie right now. It doesn't have to be this huge thing of giving up, oh, what you've loved so much, and oh my God, I have to do it for the rest of my life. I'll never have my favorite thing again in my life. You see, the way through karma is to accept the moment as it is, realize that you by nature are free, by nature, by divine company with the beloved, you're free. Even in that moment, even as karma is happening, to know that it cannot affect you. That's why the book, the Gita, tells you that, you know, the soul can't be wetted, it can't be burned, it can't be stabbed. What he's trying to say to you is that you are not affected by anything that seems to be happening by the arrangements of thoughts in the mind. It's not real. You are behind and beyond all of them. There's nothing that can touch you. There's nothing that can defeat you. There's nothing that can harm you. It's all an illusion of defeat, an illusion of harm, an illusion of pain, an illusion of suffering. You are ever free, ever pure, ever blissful. Your karma is only there to help you reach that and understand that. And the means is pure acceptance. Be present in the moment, forget the story of the past, forget the desires of the future, and do one moment at a time. And that's how we live in eternity. That's how we know God. That's where the divine is, this present moment always. All right. Any questions on anything?
Oh, one request.
Uh-huh.
This passage you just read, that all the troubles will flow
Yes.
like water under the bridge.
Yes.
And mother's other advices also, or her talks, you know, whatever. What is that? Like, I am your mother, mother of the wicked. I am the mother of the virtuous. You sing the beautiful song about that. So since this class is about mother, and after this, you have to sing that song for us.
Next week? Next week? Or you mean right now?
No. Once this small book is over.
Oh, okay.
Mother's teachings are over.
Well, that'll never happen.
That'll never happen, yeah.
Then one of these days, maybe before the next class.
Okay, I'll make a note of it, because I've made that statement once before and I still have not been true to it. Then I will bring my piano in. So I'll make a note here. And next week I'll sing that song.
And Swami, I think Ganga had her hand up. Is that correct, ladies? Yeah.
Yep.
Ganga, you're so patient.
She is, dude. She has
So
not quit
patient.
sucking that bottle yet. Look at her. Or is it eating a popsicle? What is that?
Definitely a
Popsicle.
popsicle.
Yeah.
I didn't take the photo, unfortunately, so I wouldn't know what it is.
Oh.
But it is a popsicle yeah, of something. I'm assuming it's koala friendly, obviously. I don't know what plant it is, but it's some kind of fruit vegetable concoction. There's a news article attached to the photo. I'll find it and forward it in the chat for those of you who like koalas. I was patient just because I had nothing to say. Um, because I was going to interject with what became Swami's point about the mosquito on the bulls. At first, when I read that story, I interpreted it like that was us. We are the bulls, and the mosquito is whoever is asking us help or something. I had this very, I don't know, it felt like a very amateurish interpretation until I realized we're everything in the story. We're the
Yes.
bull and the mosquito. The mosquito is our little ego. And I thought about it literally yesterday. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. That's probably what Swamiji meant, you know? And I held that for a bit and I felt it intuitively. Like that's such a neat point, but maybe I'm just that's just my interpretation. But when you said it, I was like, wow, I was so excited to hear that. It helped me.
Yes. We know all of the interpretations are true, and that's the power of scripture, is that when you read it, it will say one thing to you in that moment, and that thing that it says to you in that moment is perfect for you in that moment. When you read it again later and something different comes, or something deeper comes, or something more profound happens, that's perfect for that moment. You know, the scriptures are written as a conversation that goes on continually between us and the beloved. It's the way of communicating with God, as it were. You know, Swami Vedananda really taught me that in the way that he would read the gospel at Shanti Ashrama, that he would always pray to Mother, please give us what we need to know tonight. And he would let the book fall open to whatever page, and he would just start reading. And he says that he would always start reading and he would always sit there and look at what he's reading and insist on reading it over and over and over until he understood why Mother would give that to him in this moment. You know, and it's a very powerful way of reading scripture. You know, and so
that has been how I've been reading the gospel as well recently. And sometimes the section will feel so incredibly random, and I'll just be like, huh, okay. And I'll just like think about it and nothing will come of it. Because I kind of have this attachment to the idea that the Gospels is very esoteric and dense book that I'll never get to understand. I have this very small, what is it? Small idea of my own spiritual capabilities sometimes, and it really sells myself short and becomes an ego fixation and all this. So I'll just close it and be like, interesting. But later on in the day, there'll be a moment where it's just like some strange like feeling of remembering that passage and feeling more connected with it, even if I don't understand it. Just feeling connected with just the imagery of the scene. Who was in the room? Where was this? Was this on the veranda? Oh, I'm on my patio right now. You know, things like that. I feel like those specific things about the gospel make it feel more pertinent to me. I don't know what that is, if that has any specific indicators for my spiritual life or something. But I tend to find those passages of the gospel the most fascinating, where it's just him doing things, average things, getting shaved, walking around, sticking his head out the carriage window, which is, I guess, not as average, but still, it's relatable.
Yeah, well, this is just a fun thought. I don't want you to take it. I believe it's true, but I don't want you to take it on as a huge thing. But when you think that you don't understand the gospel, it may be true in the moment, but understand you wrote it, and understand you gave it to yourself in this game, and you've made it part of your karma and part of the story. And so, there's not too much mystery in it. It's up to you to use it, because for some reason when you took this birth, you know, what I'm getting at is that there's this imagined God, not the real God. The real God is the absolute, unchanging, that which gives us and is our hope and strength in every moment. But you in this, you are the architect of this life. You are the architect of your karma, and all the tools that are here in this world didn't come from somewhere else. They have been manifested by you, for your enlightenment, for your betterment. And so when you don't understand the scripture, be humored by that. Read it and be a little bit tickled, because you're hiding the meaning from yourself, which is quite possible. You know, I had this wonderful conversation with Swami Arapasananda, which I've shared, is where he was working. He told himself a joke. He said, and in my dreams last night, he was telling me at Trabuco Canyon Monastery. He was saying, you know, I told myself a joke in my dream last night, and I didn't get it. I couldn't get it. And he said, today I was out working in the garden. He says, I was working in the garden and I remembered the joke, and I still didn't get it. I still couldn't figure out what the joke was. And he said, and then later on, I was in the shrine room getting ready for the evening worship, and I remembered the joke again, but I got it and I busted out laughing. And he said, now imagine that. My own mind tells itself a joke that it doesn't get for quite some time, and then it gets it and laughs out loud. He says, this is the rascal that we're dealing with. You know, so all of the knowledge of the universe is yours. It is. All of the knowledge, all of the mysteries of the universe are yours. They are inherent in you. And at some point, you'll allow yourself to understand them.
Dang it. It's funny that you said that in such a specific way. There's this very pertinent passage. I think it's in Four Spiritual Four Spiritual Seekers by Swami Shivananda.
Wonderful.
And there's this very beautiful passage that I would say would be the passage that, of all the current literature that I've read within the order, it's the one that's struck me to my core the most. And it says something along the lines of, Ramakrishna is the soul of your soul, the very essence of your being, your inner controller, your inner guide. There is not one moment where he is separate from you. There's an eternal relationship, something along those lines, but very, very profoundly phrased, much better than that. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes I feel like, at least I have the tendency to see Ramakrishna as this person who lived hundreds of years ago, and the person whom I meditate on. And that's kind of, I guess, where the relationship ends. This person whom I admire, I meditate on, and who has changed the lives of many people. And I tend to see it in this specific way where there's more of a two than anything else. It's more of a separation. But in reality, if you really apply yourself in meditation, and if you really, really think about it, we've always known Ramakrishna, been Ramakrishna. I don't know. Those are just not words that I've realized or anything, but just words that give me immense comfort, because then he doesn't feel so far away anymore.
Yes, yes, indeed. Oh my gosh, he's closer. He himself says that the divine is closer, so close to you that he can hear the anklets on an ant. The other funny thing he says is, God is so close to you, he's closer to you than your own neck.
Yes. I feel like maybe it's remembrance too, because if we come back in with what was left in the mind, well, it feels like we're remembering him because we were there too. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this room, henceforth with Christ and with any other God that you feel, you know, I'll feel that way anyway.
Yes, absolutely. As we grow, we should feel that way, that you know, this is the Divine Mother, this is Ramakrishna, this is Buddha, this is Christ, this is Rama, this is Krishna. that the name doesn't matter. It's all different names for the self of ourself. Just like what Gunga said, that God is our very own. And really our journey is to understand exactly how very own of ours he is.
Yeah.
When we realize that we're so close that we're not different.
Well, like they're calling us from heaven within. It seems like that calling came from before you,
Yeah.
before you, in you, as you. Like, so yeah, I've been thinking a lot about it too. Just like all of this is projected from the inside. And
Yeah.
like you can see color in dreams, but there's no light going through the eyes. So that would tell me the light is inside, projecting like like a holographic negative, and then the light shines forth and we have manifestation. But the fact that you can see color when you're sleeping indicates there's light inside,
Yes.
But yeah, there's a whole it's freaky. It's freaky. It's all in there. It's all in there.
Yeah.
It's so
No,
true.
that's why there's lots of, from one perspective, and there's always many perspectives, but from one perspective, it's the reason we do all of our practice, because you're right. It's a real flip out of a realization, and we have to prepare ourselves to accept it, to accept this truth, because it's a whopper.
There is no spoon.
That's right. There is no spoon. That's exactly right. So, all right. Well, again, it's a joy. I'm so wonderful to talk about these things.
Thank you,
Maharaj.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Indeed, indeed. Be well, go
Be well,
forward,
everyone.
and do the work.